Welcome back to the Code Ryan podcast. Today, Dennis joins me and we're going to discuss several different web development related topics as well as what he's up to professionally these days. But before we get to that, Dennis, could you maybe just give me a little bit of your story when it comes to your tech career so far? I know you're much more successful on YouTube than myself, so I'm definitely selfishly interested in that.
Yeah, so it's kind of a long story. I'll summarize it and then we can just kind of elaborate from there if you're interested in that. But long story short, I actually got into tech like out of high school. I was just doing a bunch of odd jobs. I did everything from landscaping to being a janitor to being a handyman. Actually, at a local church, I got a job there, did some construction, but was really trying to figure out my way, into something better. And I didn't have the money for college, so I just had to make it on my own. And I really didn't, I see the value in college, but I didn't fully believe in what I wanted to, get into there. Like I didn't have a vision for it, so I just decided not to go. But yeah, I kind of got into some online stuff and, saw the world of like affiliate marketing and, getting stuff, getting products sold and pushing things and kind of living that remote life. And this is 2012. So that's kind of a new idea. This is actually going into 2013. So yeah, I started getting into that world and started learning about websites because of things like landing pages. I needed to sell products. So I learned how to build applications in Wix, learned about SEO, Google AdWords, and so on. And that eventually led into me realizing, hey, I got this skill for, marketing and building websites, even though I didn't do any coding at that point. But that basically led into freelancing, building out a marketing agency, hiring my brother, a couple of buddies of mine, and I ran a full web development agency and kind of crashed and burned by 22, I think, because that's when I got married. So right around that time, I realized, man, this is like cool, but I don't know if I want to go this specific route. And then I really liked the tech, but I found myself never having time to actually learn anything because I was too busy running the company, doing payroll, meeting with clients, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I ended up taking a job as a marketing guy at this company, and that basically led me into seeing the software that they needed at this organization, and basically saying, "Hey, I'm going to teach myself how to really code now. I'm going to build this software. I'm going to make it my job. I'm going to maybe one day sell it to my company. Maybe they'll hire me to work on it." And ended up teaching myself Python, Django, JavaScript, all that good stuff, and built it out and managed that for about 2 years until my exit, where I sold that and went full on into YouTube. So when I sold that, I had some cash in my pocket, and I basically said, hey, I could go take another job. I kind of got this good start, this good foundation, and I can go for a job, or I can teach people on YouTube, which is something I really want to do because that's how I learned. I was self-taught. So yeah, that kind of sums it up as far as like that intro. But from there, I got a little bit bored on YouTube, decided to, go back to work, but in this different approach, I took on a position called developer advocate. So I'm in my second organization doing that. And that allows me to kind of still code, but be involved in the social world, I guess, on YouTube, Twitter, and so on.
Perfect. And I know that I had this for a question for later, but real quick now, since you mentioned it, what exactly is a developer advocate, or what does like your day-to-day look like? Like I know not really knowing what it is, it feels like maybe someone that does some teaching as well and like helps developers learn about a certain product or whatever it is for your company. But what's kind of like your day-to-day look like as a developer advocate?
Sure. So it's a little bit different depending on what organization you're at. I guess the role you're assigned. In my case, I'm more public facing, but essentially a developer advocate is there to bridge the gap between developers and the core product. So in this case right now, I work at Appwrite, and we have this backend as a service platform. So we have APIs, SDKs, all these tools that you need to work with. And a developer advocate usually works, again, with our developers, with the developers out in the field. So I'm trying to get that feedback. And at the same time, I'm kind of working with marketing too. How do people use our product? And trying to understand the issues. I'm helping with documentation, tutorials, whatever that may look like. I'm basically adapting there and helping bridge the gap between that community. That usually kind of summarizes up most developer advocates, but some have skill in writing, some have skill in videos. Some of our developer advocates are just in community building, meaning they're hosting local meetups, they're flying around doing talks. So you try to keep coding involved in there. Some code more than others. I tend to code a lot more because I'm making videos, but I definitely like to keep that going because I would hate to stop coding for sure.
Gotcha. So it sounds like, you like the kind of teaching side of things and the educational side, as well as making sure that you're hands-on with the code and the development and stuff like that. So it sounds like this developer advocate position really kind of melds those two together for you pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had no idea what a developer advocate was until a buddy of mine reached out and he's like, hey, you want to, there's this position, you want to be a developer advocate? And I thought it was like, I heard like these, what do you call those? Well, they're like brand ambassadors. Like I thought maybe it was like a sponsorship. I'm like, I don't know, what is this? Because there's also Google developer expert. I thought it was just like a title that you get. So I wasn't sure. And he's like, no, this is a full on, career path and the pay's not so bad. So once he kind of showed me that, I was like, all right, I don't really need a job. I have a full-time income. I mean, I was making 6 figures with YouTube and courses, but yeah, having that steady paycheck and at the same time, I was already looking to get away from that, turned out to be pretty good. So
awesome. Cool. Well, I think that gives a really good background on yourself. And like you mentioned, you've kind of been in the online space for a while now. I feel like, every like entrepreneurial video these days is about affiliate marketing and stuff like that. But you were there in like the early days, like, 10 plus years ago. So that's pretty cool. And sounds like that also led you into web development, teaching yourself to code and kind of go against that route of things as well. So you've kind of been in this web development space for a while. So I'd just be interested, like, is there any kind of like major changes that you've seen the web development space take over the last, 10 years or so since you've kind of been in this space? Or is there anything that kind of sticks out to you of like major changes that have taken place when thinking about like modern development these days?
Oh man, yeah, so much has changed. I'm going to try to break down some details, but for one, I remember actually when I was running the agency, we had to make this isn't so much tech, but it was in the marketing side. We had to make a video on what a social media marketer or manager is. So we would actually like run campaigns for like local politicians, coffee shops, like that kind of thing on Facebook back when that was really still a thing. And people didn't understand what that was. The tech Twitter space. I mean, there's ups and downs with it, but that was not a thing when I was around. Twitter was, I knew of it, but no one ever used it. And the community around that, there's again ups and downs, but there's actually some kind of like foundation behind it where people are connected and you can really see what other people are doing out there and get feedback like instantly. Where I didn't have that. To me, it was spending time in the library. It was just looking up and getting Google search results and having to make do with what I had. So the education space has absolutely shifted. Like people found a way to monetize it, and that can lead to bad, but also a lot of good because now you have a lot of free content.
Yep, absolutely. I think there is, like you said, it's a double-edged sword where there's definitely an abundance of content out there, but since there's an abundance of content, it's hard to kind of know, which way to go. And, you have this very convincing guy pushing this way of web development and then this other convincing guy pushing this way. And it's kind of hard to decide that path. And maybe like just for you, when you're kind of looking to learn a new topic or learn a new subject, what is maybe like your process to go learn something? Like, are you going to the documentation first and kind of going through that? Or do you yourself go to YouTube, or what's kind of your process for that?
Well, it's changed a lot since I started. So first of all, I actually kind of feel bad for new developers nowadays because I'm one where if I was in this world, I'd be distracted a little bit, but I'm pretty like thick-skulled where like once I made my decision, I'm going that way. You're not going to get me into anything new. But there's like all the new tech with Bun, with Dino, all this hype that's coming out. I mean, these poor developers don't know where to look. And sometimes I'll just do like satire on Twitter, and I feel bad because people will respond thinking that that's, kind of like the next thing that everyone's pushing. It's like, no, just focus on your basics, stick to that, and then worry about this stuff later. So let the hype train die out. And that's kind of my advice to new developers. But as far as like my learning method, it used to be YouTube. Like that's usually where I'd start. I'd love to get a book. So a lot of times, like when I was just learning how to code, I literally didn't know what a programming language was. Like you could have told me HTML is a programming language. I'd be like, okay, cool. So there was so much information that I completely just didn't understand. So I didn't know what I needed to know. So typically it's like a YouTube course, some kind of book that just gets me that foundation. And I'm marking notes the whole time. Like even if I don't understand everything, I'm building out this framework of like, okay, these are all these things that I don't understand, but I'm going to start learning about them and start trying to understand what they are later. Like I won't break them down right away, but I'll put them into my like to-do list. So like when I was learning how to build websites, like I didn't know what an API was. I didn't know like how to deploy a server or anything like that. But instead of stressing myself out, I would try to just like summarize the book and then build my roots in my own course and start taking that. So usually, yeah, it's a video or a book to start. Right nowadays, it's a Fireship video, usually just to kind of get a summary of something. Like if there's something new, I'm like, all right, what does Fireship have to say about it? Yeah. Because I usually don't dig into anything new, but I like to know what's out there. So like, I've never tried Bun yet, but I'm aware of it, and I'll watch a crash course real quick and then continue on.
Yep. And I totally agree. I think that there are so many different technologies coming out these days. And now on top of that, we also have kind of, it's hard for me to tell at this point whether it's just hype or whether there's like some serious implications to developers behind it. And that is artificial intelligence and ChatGPT writing code and GitHub Copilot writing code and all this stuff. And, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts around, how are you kind of currently feeling about the state of AI as it relates to developers? And like, do you think we should all be worried about our jobs, or how are you kind of feeling about that?
So I'm very optimistic. I don't get into the fear train, I guess, with that. It's absolutely going to be taking certain jobs in coding terms. It's going to only make your job better. Like I'm a way different coder than I was, before all this stuff. Things like Copilot, ChatGPT, and I use something called Find.com, Phind, and that is kind of like Bard, where it gives you modern data, where like it's not trained on like ChatGPT's 2021 and back, whereas this I can actually like get modern data. So I use it a lot in my search. It just made me a lot faster, and in my research, it's a lot different. Like when I used to have to find do some studying on a topic, I'd have to just go through all these articles, whatever Google had indexed for me, and I would just read through just tons and tons of content before I can find that one piece of information. So with these tools, I'm usually able to kind of like go back and forth with this content with ChatGPT or Find, and I'm able to get feedback right away. Now, I'm not worried about taking my job because once you understand how it actually works, I don't think you'll fear it, because it's just not capable of doing what humans can do. There's just so much more to it. It's like that joke where if customers can't explain what they want, how is an AI going to figure out what they need to build? Like, that's our job. We need to do that. So yeah, I'm very optimistic. I think it's only going to make us better. And with this, it's the same fear that people had back in the day when we used to just code HTML and CSS websites, and then all these frameworks started coming out, all these tools, and it's only created more jobs. I mean, now you have to know, React, Angular, Vue, Svelte, all these different tools, which in one way stresses you out, but in another way actually opens up the job market like a lot more.
Yep. And I'm in a very similar camp. Like my job, I'm fully on the development side of things. So basically writing code all day, every day. And I know that for me, especially the like GPT-4, hooking that up to like their browser plugin. And if it's like a new technology, like I'd implement something with Chrome database and never used that before. I'm not sure what like their API looks like. I just asked GPT-4, hey, read this website URL and tell me how to delete a query or a document from this database. And they give me a nice little example function, and it just removed all that time that I would have spent like reading through the docs, trying to find that like specific section that showed me the specific example of what I actually needed. So to me, it just has increased my productivity. But with that, it's like I still needed to know how to use Python, how to use the request library, how to make that request to the backend, to make that delete request. So I still had to like know all the architecture and fit everything together. ChatGPT would just like provided that information for me to do it a little bit more quickly. So I think it can absolutely make developers more productive, but I still think we're a long ways away from GPT just being able to do everything for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, it's not the best coder either. Like, you ever got responses from it? It's like your stupidly confident friend that may have access to a lot of information but doesn't know how to really make sense of it. Where it's just like, yeah, this is it, and you're like, no, that's wrong, and it's like, oh, this is actually the answer. You're like, no, and I'll find myself arguing with it. But yeah, I'm definitely aware of how to use it. As far as what you said about the docs, I mean, at Appwrite, like, I literally search our docs using Find, like, because it's all modern data. So like, instead of going through like, where was that specific thing, I'll just like punch in a function or an API request and be like, hey, I need information about this, and I'll literally go search the Appwrite documentation, and I have all that right there. Like, I didn't have to spend 10 minutes try to figure out where it was or find a link that I had saved earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely just kind of sifts through that information very easily and kind of gives you what you need. But like you said, sometimes it hallucinates things and it writes things that are just like completely off. I don't know where this even came from. So yeah, I think it's a useful tool. can generally increase productivity, but like you said, I don't see it replacing everybody anytime soon. And, I really like your kind of analogy with the frameworks and stuff. Like, yes, frameworks made developers more productive, but we didn't see demand for developers go down just because developers got more productive. Like, if anything, demand for developers is, at all-time highs. So I think that, I might be a little bit biased because I'm a developer and I'm hoping to have this career for a long time, but I don't think that it's going to be the doom and gloom that a lot of people are suggesting. So kind of with that, you had a tweet a while back. So I kind of sifted through your Twitter to look for some good stuff here. And one kind of area that you discussed is how it was kind of a spicy tweet where you mentioned that you don't really think a lot of people understand like what a REST API is. And that kind of piqued my interest. And one kind of question for you is, are there any other kind of areas of web development that you think that people might think they know what it is, or they talk about it a lot and they say words that sound good, but they might not actually really know kind of what it is?
Serverless, edge functions. There's a lot. REST API.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I might not even fully be able to explain. The whole REST API comment was that people don't really understand like the REST protocol or standard. Like they'll just say, "Oh, it's a REST API." And it's like, well, it's an API, but it's not necessarily RESTful. Like that was the whole idea behind it. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that, and I don't really blame people. Like there's so much that information that we're cramming into our heads, especially if you're working on the full stack. Like if you're doing back end and front end, yeah, like so many times I'll have to just like look up, I'll look up what someone said like in a conversation, and then I'll have to validate. I'm like, okay, yeah, I do know what that is. I just wasn't fully aware of it. Like when I was doing interviews, a couple months back, I had to go through all my JavaScript knowledge. Like there's so many things that like I totally understand how everything works, how the V8 engine works under the hood. But I couldn't, like, if you ask me those technical details, I wouldn't be able to fully summarize them. Like, yeah.
That's one reason why I like creating content and trying to explain things as well, because it's like, okay, I understand how closures work, but when I go to explain it, sometimes you like lose the words and then it's like, oh wait, is that actually how it works? Or now I'm second guessing myself, and you definitely don't want to do that like in an interview setting. So I think that can really help, but I kind of cut you off there. What were you gonna go on there?
Oh no, I was just gonna keep rambling about different topics, but I kind of lost it already. Yeah, that's a funny point that you said. I hate that we have to go through that, like the whole interviewing thing. Like it's literally a skill in its own. Like I can take most any job and just absolutely excel in it, but going through that interview process, you miss one word. I mean, a lot of times it is on the interviewer. Like I think it's either they're low on time, or they're maybe just not the best at really finding talent. But they'll grade you so hard on stuff like that, and you'll end up like screwing up, even if you're a good candidate for that job, just on one little word like that, because they might think, oh, this person should know that. And you're like, it's in there. I totally get it, but I can't explain it like right at this moment. And I had that at a job before Appwrite. I'm actually really glad I didn't get that job, but they asked me about database indexing. And I was just like, I literally had it on the tip of my tongue. I'm like, I can't figure out what it was. And I got docked so bad for that. And in fact, when they responded like to why they didn't hire me, it was, oh, we feel like we need somebody who's a better Postgres, who understands Postgres better. Because that's kind of what the job was for, was a Postgres developer. And I was like, well, I totally know what Postgres is and I can tell you so much about it. I missed out one thing. I was like, dang, that kind of sucked.
Yeah, and that is like inherent to interviews in general, to where like you have like 30 to 60 minutes to make this single impression on someone about how you are going to be as an employee for the next 3, 5, several years. And it's like you really don't know. Even if someone aces an interview, they might just be good at interviewing and they might not actually be that great of a developer and programmer. So
yes.
I don't know how to really solve the issue, but I definitely think there's an issue there for sure. But maybe to kind of transition here, and real quick before we transition, so one thing that you've kind of alluded to as we've talked here is that it sounds like when you're learning something, you really take time to actually understand what's going on. Like I think that when a lot of people first start out, and even when I was first starting out, it was almost like I was just trying to get through as much content as I could. rather than actually seeking to understand the content and actually learn about it. And you kind of mentioned there, you would kind of take a step back, you would write down notes, and then you'd kind of go explore those afterwards. You've gotten through the content to really make sure you understand. So I think that's like a really important point for someone starting out, is like, don't try to just get through this abundance of content and, you know, there's no reward for getting through all the content. The reward is actually learning and understanding something and being able to get a job or a promotion or whatever it is beyond that. So I really like your approach there to learning new things.
Yeah, with that though, there's one thing I want to add, because I'm also like, I'm good at not jumping too far ahead, but I'm also good at ignoring details that may be helpful but would confuse me at the moment. So for example, like if I'm trying to complete a task, like I was on this mission when I was building the software, it was a huge task because I didn't know how to code at all. And I was basically responsible for transferring everything to this, company, and basically transferring very sensitive data. I would basically set a goal like every, just imagine every 10 feet or whatever, but in this case, every milestone. And I'll say, okay, I need to take in some data and I need to store it and process it in this way. I would only learn what I would need for that specific task. Like, okay, how do I set up an application with basic CRUD operations that run some kind of calculation in the background? And there was information that I needed that would have made my project a lot better that I eventually kind of added to that and improved upon it. But if I try to study all that too early, I would have never built what I needed to build. So I would be very careful in saying, okay, I only need this. I'll figure out what I need later on, kind of as we go. So I was very, very specific in what I wanted and kind of tuned out a lot of those other things. Because if I started studying, how to build the most RESTful API, for example, that would have been a whole nother rabbit hole. Even though my API wasn't RESTful, it worked. And then later on, I went back and I cleaned up that code. So I just want to throw that in there because some people might hear that and think, okay, well, I need to be very articulate and try to study everything, but then kind of get caught up in that and then really not retain the information, because I retain the information best when I either made a mistake or when it really caused like a problem and I need to finally understand it. And that's when it locked in, because I made sense of it and why it was important for me to know that.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a really good point to make, because there is a balance there to where you don't want to go down every single rabbit hole and just get overwhelmed and then you never actually solve the task at hand. But on the flip side, you also want to kind of understand how things are working enough to where you're actually furthering your learning and building like a better base kind of foundation of things. So I definitely think there is kind of that balance there. And, it's kind of a skill to be able to just focus on what you know you need to focus on and not go down those rabbit holes, but also really understand what you're kind of focusing on. So I think that's a really good point there. But maybe to just kind of transition here to kind of wrap up on Appwrite. So what is Appwrite, and what are maybe some benefits of it, and why might someone use this product?
I'll start with a question. You know what Firebase is by any chance? Or the concept of a backend as a service?
Yes. Google.
Yeah. So as a full stack developer, I was actually very hesitant to ever even use a service like that because I needed to control everything. But Appwrite essentially is a backend as a service. We're a competitor to Firebase, but we're an open source alternative to them with different tools. Our tools kind of vary, but we do accomplish the same thing basically. The goal that Appwrite is really trying to solve is we're trying to build with the open source community, but at the same time try to solve issues like vendor lock-in, like pricing. A lot of the issues that Firebase has. People have issues with scaling with Firebase because you might be able to get an MVP up and going really quick, but once that project hits scale, you're going to have a nice bill, a nice bill in the email, or I was going to say mail, but you're going to have a heavy bill, and that can really be an issue. If you want to move away from Firebase, it's you're going to have a lot of difficulty in transferring that data away. So we really wanted to kind of like democratize backend development. So we do have a cloud offering where you could just set up an application real quick on our cloud platform and you're ready to go. But if you want to take Appwrite, you download it locally, it's all yours. How you host it, it's free. You figure out how you deploy it, whether it's DigitalOcean or anything else, and you have complete control over that. So you don't have to worry about Google shutting down this service just like Facebook did with Parse several years ago, where it's like all of a sudden all these people that built with this tool it's done. So that's kind of like the benefit of it is we open source it, we're building with the community, and it truly is yours when you use it, and you get to decide how you implement it.
Awesome. I really like that. As you know, I've used Firebase before. We also use like AWS services and different things like that. And you can most definitely get that vendor lock-in to where it's like, if you use one service from this kind of provider, you're kind of in their environment and you kind of need to go everything with that route. And it's also there's very high switching costs to kind of going back and forth. And I also like that Appwrite is kind of open source there. So I'm definitely going to have to kind of give this a try on my channel when I'm building my Next.js apps. I'm guessing Appwrite is pretty agnostic to whether you use a Next.js or React or Vue, Angular. I'm guessing it's pretty agnostic to any of those frameworks.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be really easy to use with those. I think there's over 14 SDKs right now. It's like we got a great web SDK, Flutter, iOS. For server-side SDKs, I mean, we have everything from Python, .NET, Node, PHP. Like, there's a lot you can do with it. So even if you're using it in a server-side application, like I'm actually using Appwrite with a Django project just for some of its tools for authentication. Actually, that's one of the things I'm trying to use it for. You just connect with this Python SDK and you're good to go. Like, you can make those same queries if you need.
Awesome. And if someone like myself wanted to get started with Appwrite, what would you kind of recommend as a starting place? Would you recommend just going to the docs? Maybe there's like a getting started guide, or maybe you personally have some tutorials and stuff like that, or where should someone kind of get started with it?
So at the moment, I recommend starting with the docs just because the documentation is good with a good quick start guide. But I was literally hired to make the video content. Like, that's my main focus is YouTube. So I'm going to be doing a full overhaul, crash courses, project-based tutorials, anything you can think of. My job is to make sure that I can present all the use cases and explain, how Appwrite works, give people those examples. So go to the YouTube page, or not YouTube page, YouTube channel, check it out. But I'll probably start with the docs because the YouTube channel is going to be filled up with content, but it's not loaded yet. There's still good information there, though. At the same time, it's a relatively new product. I mean, Appwrite hit the market in 2019, and we just got our cloud platform earlier this year. So videos that you've seen in the past might look a lot different. Like, we're adding tools or adding stuff all the time to it. So even everything from like a rebrand to a redesign, like, things are changing. So that's going to be evolving pretty quick.
Awesome. Well, I'm definitely going to go check it out. Maybe for my next project on my channel, I'll integrate Appwrite and kind of see how I get out with it. So awesome, man. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation. Like, selfishly for me, I know that I kind of learned a lot. If people want to kind of stay up to date with what you're doing, you mentioned Twitter earlier. You also have a YouTube channel. Where are some good places that they can go to kind of stay up to date with that?
Twitter and YouTube. I'm not much of a social media person. I'm not as active as I should be, but I'm trying to get more active on Twitter. But yeah, that's where you can connect with me. But any updates are going to be there, or YouTube for me. Keep it pretty simple.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.